So to introduce myself, for anyone who doesn't know who I am, I'm Sherry Braithwaite. I facilitate a singles group. It's a Christian singles community. This group has professionals who are all interested in personal development and in all areas. And this month we are focusing on living a balanced life. To sum it up, we learn how to thrive regardless of our circumstances. And there's a lot of healing also after a major marital loss. People are just in there to support whoever wants to be supported. And there's areas we have that we can help each other and areas that we can be helped. So Micheal's area of expertise is finances. It's a real application of success and money principles. Micheal has 24 years of being a licensed financial professional, 34 years as an entrepreneur, and 47 years of solid attempts at self-improvement. He started when he was like 0, maybe 1.
Yeah.
But he's a public speaker. So anyway, I'm just going to turn the time over to Micheal. I'm excited to hear all that he can teach us tonight. Thank you, Micheal, for being here.
My pleasure to be here. My background and expertise is lifelong entrepreneur, never had a job, always worked for myself. So my space in terms of entrepreneurship, and have done, 24 years of mentoring and coaching on how to work for yourself and succeed, and then personal development, which goes hand in hand with that. But a lot of work in how to reprogram your brain, how to develop new habits, how to adjust your mindset. A lot of it is mental toughness and focusing on just how you see life and how you can see it differently. I would say that I'm an expert in change. And so for the purposes of that subject, we have some popular sayings in the world. One of them is, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. The author of that was the devil himself.
Yes.
It goes, there's a lot of things that we think are fun to say because we've just heard them before, but so damaging in terms of the mentality. If there was one reason we were placed here, it was to change. So if there's one thing that the opposition wants us to do, is to not change.
Stay stuck.
and to be discouraged about change. So I would say that I'm definitely an expert in change and have invested the majority of my adult life in changing and teaching other people how to change, both their habits, their mentality, their thoughts, those types of things. And it's not easy. As with most things in life, we will constantly be under sort of a gravitational pull to the negative. We will feel a pull downward. And it takes no effort to allow that to drag us down mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. So we have to realize that there is this constant negative weight against us, against progression, and that we have to actually express energy in order to combat, and even just to maintain actually takes energy. Otherwise, we digress over time. And then the area professionally, by way of the actual service, is the financial world. So I'm licensed in multiple areas of finance, and I have helped people for almost 25 years now with financial strategies. So kind of a brief idea of the platform of my company, so you understand where I can be of help and where I can't, because you can't be a master of all.
Before you jump in there, do you mind? This is something that just keeps coming to my mind that I think would be really valuable for people who are maybe listening, is to tell briefly, as briefly as you want, what you told me about your history of this is the thing that just struck me when you were talking about, is when you were a young child and your parents were struggling, and you were watching your father, and then you were watching your friend and his dad. And anyway, those kinds of things that you were saying, I think is just so powerful, I think that would relate to the people would relate to that part of the story. And then you can jump in and tell us all the things you do and how you can help us.
Yeah. So what we were discussing earlier is, I'm sure everyone on here has heard the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I actually kind of experienced that to a degree growing up, where the premise behind the book by Robert Kiyosaki is that his dad was, I believe, an educator. He earned an average living, but he had sort of this, employee mentality. And the ideas behind that were, to a large extent, they were fear-based. They were that of scarcity. And then he had a close friend whose dad was a very wealthy person. And I had the same thing. One of my best friend's father was a decamillionaire. And I saw the contrast in lifestyle. I saw the contrast in mentality, attitude, just perception. And I was drawn to that. And so I started my first company when I was 14 years old, my first small business, I should say. And it was provoked also by the fact that my dad had lost his job. He had worked for one of the top defense contractors for the government for 17 years. And then at that time, I was 14 years old. So he'd started a few years before I was born. Had you asked my dad a few months prior to his company bankrupting, if you would have asked him where he's going to be for the rest of his life, he would have said, "Oh, my company would never go anywhere," right? This huge, massive company. But the company lost a government contract, and overnight they execute a bankruptcy and they laid off tens of thousands of people. And so the rug was just pulled out from under my family. And our church brought us food for 5 years. My parents suffered total financial devastation. That company took their retirement, their pension, their stock. They had done everything that they were told to do by the traditional financial world, by big corporate finance and big corporate America. But it turns out those things are totally different from what you'll see the wealthy doing with their money. Mm-hmm. So when I got into my early 20s, I ran into the financial industry, and suddenly this prior experience of watching my parents go through what they went through, and the amount of stress that brought, and the sad tragedy that was, I now realized that tragic thing could have been avoided. And so it made it much worse. And so when I saw the financial world, where I connected those two things was I could actually learn how to save families from what my parents went through. Had my parents sat down with somebody like me now, I could have taught them how to prepare themselves and protect themselves from losing everything. And so what I've done, complicated story made short, is I've contracted with over 150 of the largest financial companies in the world, like Fidelity, Goldman Sachs, T. Rowe Price, Morgan Stanley, Prudential, Nationwide, you name them. I pretty much have a contract with them. And what we do is we constantly keep track of who's got the best retirement strategies, investment plans, life insurance, different strategies that are out there. And then I have a proprietary computer software program, and we sit down with people and we analyze 6 areas of finance. Their cash flow. So we're asking questions in these 6 areas about their cash flow, their debt, their emergency funds. So if something were to happen, refrigerator dies, transmission goes out, roof needs to be repaired, what do you have in liquid cash, or how can you handle these emergencies? Then it's life insurance protection, asset accumulation, which is investments and retirement, those types of things. And the last one is estate planning, like wills and trusts, and making sure you have proper legal documents in place. So the software is a questionnaire where we ask questions in all those areas. And then the software generates a report. It analyzes your current situation. We also ask a lot of questions in regards to goals and objectives. So when do you want to retire? What sort of lifestyle are you after? we make it easy. And we actually create this profile, and the computer software program will factor in inflation, return, taxation, Social Security, all these factors. And it will project out to, let's say, age 65 or age 70, whenever you want to exit the workforce. And it will tell you exactly where you're headed.
Nice.
So it will analyze your situation and allow us to see if you're behind or if you're ahead of schedule or if you're on track. It will also tell us exactly how much life insurance protection you should have, and it will itemize it and tell you why, so we can explain. Most people have no idea how much emergency money they should have, how much they will need to retire, how much life insurance they should have. So we tell them in minutes what they're going to need to do in order to shore up their financial situation. And then we shop out these 150 companies. We just research and look at what's out there that's the best. And it's math based, it's not opinion based. And we come back and say, here's what's best for you. Not only that, we're then going to meet with that client periodically. So there's just a lot of things out there. So I got super passionate in my early 20s about helping people to do that. So we've got a book that's an easy read on finances. I put a phone number in there where you can shoot a text if you want. So this phone number is will get to us where we could send out information, even set up a Zoom call to answer questions one-on-one. I've also helped a lot of people that are going through divorce learn how to divide assets, how to get the best situation for you. The scary thing about divorce, having gone through it myself, is sometimes the person you can trust the least is your own attorney. And that's a sad thing to say, but it is true. In some cases, they will try to create this super phenomenal idea in your mind about what the outcome will be so that mediation will fail. And that means they can keep you on the payroll for a longer period of time. And it's something that I see happen all the time. So sometimes you need somebody completely separate to help you see what's realistic. All of this stuff, when I started through my divorce, I just got to the absolute low of lows, and I was not sleeping at night. I was having trouble. I was 85 pounds overweight. And I was having anxiety 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. My just heart pounding all the time. I was sick to my stomach, crying all the time because I'm missing my kids, fighting for every minute that I can get with them. And I woke up one morning, and I can say that, and I think people can relate to this if you've been through divorce, but I never thought to myself, I'm going to kill myself. But I definitely thought to myself, I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to do this. I don't have the strength anymore. I'm so tired of fighting. And at that time, I was only 3 months into it. I ended up being over 3 years into it. But I woke up one morning, and I'd only slept maybe an hour or two all night long. I really was in bad shape, and I just woke up in the morning and I thought, I literally cannot do this another day. I don't have it in me. And I broke down and cried for like 2 hours that morning. And I just thought, I have to start controlling what I can control, and I have to start learning to let go of what I can't. And so that's when I wrote down the 5 F's. So it was faith, family, fitness, finance, and fun. And I decided I have to set daily goals in these 5 areas that are very achievable, very doable. And I have to start gaining control over as much as I can. And so I didn't start with huge stuff. I mean, being 85 pounds overweight, I'm 5'9", and at the time I weighed 245. And I just felt horrible. And I had heard and I had read that that a lot of controlling nutrition and controlling fitness can help with emotions. So I thought, I need all the help I can get. So I did simple things to start. I decided I have to do things I know I can do. So I'm just going to start simple. I started drinking water instead of soft drinks or anything. I started trying to avoid sugars. I just started looking for healthy ways to do different things. And then after a couple of months, I started going to the gym and exercising because I knew I needed an outlet to release some of that energy and, and work some of those feelings out. And then after a little bit of momentum, I started seeking professional guidance and professional help. I know this is a singles world that you're in here. I am not. I have a super amazing sweetheart. She might join us sometime tonight, but she's actually a doctor with an emphasis in nutrition. So I started seeking people like that who could help me understand how to eat better, and started realizing that there were foods that contributed to emotional health and foods that went against it.
Yes.
And so I hired someone to help me with fitness, with exercise, and hired someone to help me with health. She actually specializes specifically in women's weight loss now and nutrition. And you can look her up. Her name is Cintia Micheal. She's with Utah Stem Cells, but you can look her up on Facebook. She meets with people. We'll do a full, review, consultation, sit down. And what I love about what she does is they'll do blood work and they'll really look at hormones, which they're big into making sure that the hormones are balanced. Once I started getting my hormones in balance, I was low testosterone, which contributed to low energy, low activity, low drives of all types, and isn't good for the mentality. So once I started seeing where I was at, using somebody like this to really take a healthy approach to life, and people just underestimate the value of all this stuff. But I set goals in each one of these areas, and I just took it piece by piece, and I kept doing it.
That I wanted to clarify that with you. You said daily goal, like you do these, you find time for fun every day.
Yeah, I called it my dailies.
Awesome.
And my non-negotiables.
Non-negotiables.
I started developing non-negotiables in relationships. And this is another word for maybe creating boundaries.
Yeah.
I also became very, very transparent. Honesty is a huge thing. And, I'm not perfect. I mean, we all make mistakes. But I started being very transparent about my feelings, about what I was experiencing. And if I can't be transparent with someone and can't talk to someone, then we can't have a relationship.
Yeah. Too about you. Am I interrupting?
No, go ahead.
I wanted to have you talk about, so the beginning of the year, you posted I think you posted a before and after.
Yeah.
Where you were a few years ago and where you are today. And then you said, I'm working on some huge goals. I don't know all the wording, but it was a very inspiring post. And I reached out to you and asked you, so what are these huge goals? I'm interested to know what these huge goals are that you're working on.
Yeah. So a year ago, I sent out that post. And so one of my huge goals I set was in fitness. And I set a goal to compete in a natural bodybuilding competition.
Yeah, that's what it was.
But my goal wasn't just to compete. My goal was to win and be designated. If you win a natural bodybuilding competition, you are now granted professional status. So in August, I competed in the Utah State Naturals, and I actually won. So I became a pro natural bodybuilder in August. And then about 5 weeks later, I competed in my first professional competition, which was in Vegas, at the Vegas Naturals. And I took second And with that one, I was invited to participate next year in the with Team USA in the Natural Olympia. So next November, that will be the objective. But then
Natural as in no steroids, right?
no steroids, right? The reason I like the natural approach is because in those competition, you're tested by the same testing organization that tests Olympic athletes.
Okay.
So it's WADA, WADA. And I was actually competing against over 50 males in that. And I was definitely I'm almost 50. I was one of the oldest people at the competition. I was competing against guys in their 20s. And I ended up getting tested because they thought I was so much bigger than the other people. So that was actually a proud moment to get tested. But I tested clean, and it was a fun experience. Now they just announced their next competition in Utah, and they actually have me on the cover of the poster. I'll be posting that online in the next few days. So that was kind of fun so I might be showing up to the one in April because it's hard not to if you're on the poster. But yeah, I appreciate you asking. That was a fun one.
A lot of people, we all have these goals, and that's something you can even talk about too, that I know is inspiring for us. Being up on January, people start feeling down on themselves because they didn't reach the goals.
This is another thing that I find that people struggle with, particularly when you go through divorce. People struggle with self-confidence and self-esteem,
Motivation,
and having a positive self-image. Do you know what the number one way is to build self-esteem?
so
It's to keep your word to yourself. So by setting daily goals, simple little things, you know what, starting habits is one thing, and then the second skill set is keeping those habits. And then let me tell you the most important thing I've learned by a long shot. You will start new habits, you will keep them for a period of time, but inevitably you're going to run across bumps in the road. And so my commitment is that people that are successful, happy, fulfilled, they develop one thing above anything else, and that is they never stop starting. You know, it's one thing to start and then people think, oh, I didn't hit my goals, so I failed. No, you didn't. In order for change to really happen, you have to have a significant emotional experience. You have to have some type of significant emotional experience, and a lot of times that comes through hitting a very low point, and simply coming to the conclusion over time that I don't want to feel bad anymore. I want to rise up. I'm tired. I'm just sick and tired of being sick and tired. And so every time you start and stop and start and stop, you're making progress. Even though you stopped, you're still making progress because you've endured.
You're closer than you were yesterday, right?
Yeah. And even when you fail, you've still succeeded because at least you started again. You know, I was talking, I have a relative who got hooked. He hurt his back when he was a teenager, and they did what they always do in America. They put him on pharmaceuticals. And so he got on pain meds, and he got hooked on pain meds in his teens. He fought to come off of them and went on an LDS mission. And then he got home and he got back on them again, re-injured himself, got back on them again. And for literally 30 years, he was addicted to pain medicine. He lost careers, he lost houses, he lost his wife, he lost his kids, he lost everything. And I asked him, he's now married again. He's now in his 60s. And I asked him one time at a family party, I said, what was the real breaking point for you? And he said, well, I had hit the absolute bottom. You would have thought I would have hit it way before, but I hit the bottom, and then I'd bounce off of it and bounce off of it and bounce off of it. And he said, one day, the thing that really changed in my mind was prior to, I would stop using the drugs for a week or 2 weeks, sometimes a month. And then I would hit a day that was too hard and I'd give into temptation and I'd use them again. And in the past, my mentality was, well, I failed, so all is lost. I'm a horrible person. And he said, I used to just beat myself up so badly that I would lose hope.
Yeah.
He said the transition was when I hit this discovery that instead of going a week and then giving into temptation and using again, and then saying all is lost, I'm a horrible person, I'm never going to overcome this. He said the transition in my mind shifted to, at least I didn't use for a week. I've now only used one time in 7 days. So now I just need to see if I can go 8 days or 9 days. And he said, so I shifted the mentality from, and by the way, we're really bad at this in Utah. Huge amounts of shaming, huge amounts of blame and shame. We have shame-based parenting. We have shame-based communities. Yeah. And I had a total shift with this. I've become a completely ultra transparent, parent. I remember driving with my son. I just warn you that you'll probably be shocked with what I'm about to say, but this is what transparency is. So I'm riding with my son at this time. I have 3 boys, riding with one of my sons, and we're driving in the car to a soccer tournament. It's about an hour and a half away. This was about 3 years ago. So I'm in the divorce, but I signed up for a 1.5 year long class because I wanted to not blame my ex, even though I felt like she was more to blame than me, which is probably how everyone thinks. I decided I can't control her, so I'm just going to focus on what can I become better in me. And so I took a class and I went to therapy for 2 years and I did homework every single day. And I just dove into, regardless of what she did to me, I still control how I respond. And so I happened to have, I was in a marriage where intimacy only happened in some years only 2 or 3 times in a year. And so I became very closed in, very sad, very, I'm physical touch, my love language, and then words of affirmation. And so I did things, I reacted to that pain, that rejection in ways that weren't the best. One of those mistakes I made was I looked at pornography. And to say that out loud in most circumstances is so shame-based that people feel like there's no recovery, like, hey, you can't, do all these things. But I justified it as, well, I'm not loved and it's not healthy not to have a relationship, blah, blah, blah. What I discovered through my process of reprogramming was that wasn't about anything other than an escape from pain. And so I learned these things and I thought, wow. So what led me to being transparent was, if I don't feel good emotionally, and what men have a tendency to do is, particularly if you can't talk to your spouse about how you feel, which I couldn't, then you hold everything in and it's poison to the soul. So once I learned all this, I became worried about my boys. And I was driving in the car with one of my sons and I said, hey buddy, let's take off the headphones and let's talk for a minute. We got a long drive. And he said, okay, super good kid. And I said, hey bud, did I ever tell you about the first time I was exposed to pornography? And he goes, I just said it like a normal conversation. Yeah. And he goes like this. What? He goes, he just like this. You seen porn? And I said, yeah. And he said something that made me cry for 5 minutes. I couldn't speak. He said, I thought you were perfect. And I just started bawling this is also a huge problem with the females in our society, is these complexes of perfectionism.
Yep.
I have to be perfect. And social media isn't helping. It's creating this additional thing where you're only seeing the good in other people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
So you think your life isn't good enough, and you start to compare, and you get into all these things. And we think we have to be perfect at raising the kids and keeping the house clean and doing all these things. And we're so hard on ourselves.
Yeah.
And then females will turn to those types of things as well, about 30% of the time, but men are more prone to that. But females will turn to other things.
It's coping, right? Like you
Yeah,
said.
it's an escape, any way to escape the pain, because you're not allowing your brain to properly process the pain, and you're not letting it out. You're not expressing that pain. And so my son, after I stopped crying, I said, yeah, I was like 12 years old, and my cousin and I saw a magazine on the ground. And I remember thinking, oh, that's intriguing. That looks, that's kind of fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to him the same thing you would hear from ecclesiastical leadership. I said to him, those are natural feelings. Those are good feelings. Those are feelings that God gave you. But it's important that you learn to control them. And then just like that, without a breath, he said, yeah. And he just started telling me about everything he had ever experienced.
Good, because you were open and allowed him to be open.
Yeah. And he didn't have what I would consider a problem. Neither did I. But that next Sunday, he said to me, Dad, would you go with me to talk to the bishop? Nice. And I just cried and gave him a hug. And I said, of course, buddy, I'm here. And we went and had a very, very uplifting, positive conversation. It was life-changing. Yeah. And so there's this open thing. If I'm feeling sad or frustrated in the morning, I'll literally walk downstairs. I have my boys now every other week, and I have a daughter that's 20. Super proud dad. She's now Miss Roy and going for Miss Utah in June. But she's busy doing all things and pursuing law school and different things. But I'll walk downstairs, and particularly with my boys, I'll say, you know what, guys, I don't feel awesome today. I kind of feel bummed. How do you guys feel? And so just teaching them that it's healthy and good to share your feelings and to talk through things and never hold things back. And you should never be embarrassed about being sad or depressed or frustrated. And so we have a lot of great conversations. So through this whole process of discovery about controlling what you can and doing all these things, if you have a balance in these areas, and instead of looking at your goals the way that most people do, where I'm setting these like lofty things to aim at, here's some advice I would give you. When you set your goals in these areas, set minimum standards of performance, and then set go for it goals. So you have a range to operate in. And the more you keep your word to yourself, the more you start to believe in yourself, the more you start to trust yourself, the happier you'll be, the more peace you'll find, and the more self-esteem and more confidence you'll build. And I did a post just days ago. I don't know if you saw it, it was called Real Men. Oh, you did see that one.
I did, and I shared it. Yeah, I loved it. Yeah. It's
funny, but I got 2 aggressive attacks from people about that post.
I saw that, but it just was a reflection on them is how I saw it.
Yeah. And one of them I deleted just because I didn't want her to feel embarrassed. And
yeah,
I didn't feel like, but the context of that post is important. I was talking about when you're an adult man and you're dating and you're trying to discover, how do I become a better person and a better partner and a better spouse so that I don't go through a second or a third or a fourth or a fifth or whatever the number is. I don't want to go through this again. Yeah. So how do I land with the right person, and how do I be the right person?
Yeah.
And I was exposed to 2 relationship situations in the last 7 days. One where I was told of a man who laid hands on a woman because he was so frustrated. He physically grabbed her and tried to enforce his will upon her. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to explain that if you're a real man, you don't have to yell and scream and use force of your voice or your physical strength to get your point across. You just have to calmly stay stay non-emotional. You certainly want to express empathy for someone and you want to listen to them. But if you share your opinion over and over and over again and you do it calmly, you'll either find that somebody respects your opinion and connects with you and resonates with you, or they don't. But if they don't resonate with you, you should be able to walk away quietly like a gentleman and not try to impose your will.
Yes.
And that's hard for people, you know.
So someone approached you before that was the inspiration for the post, or did that come out after? Oh.
I had had two experiences. One where a gentleman was trying to express his wants and his needs, and he did it calmly, but it just wasn't being heard and it wasn't being appreciated. And over months and months and months, he finally just said, okay, well, this person obviously isn't for me and they don't want what I want. And so I'm going to walk away with dignity, and I'm going to walk away with no regrets because I acted like a gentleman. And to be honest with you, there's an update on that I just have received in the last few days, where because he walked away that way, she responded back and realized how good of a guy he was. And literally, good for her, she was humble and said, I realized that I might have screwed up the best thing I've ever had in my life, and I was being a brat and I was being disrespectful. And if you'll give me one more chance, I'd like to prove that I can change and I can listen and I can not be a drama queen, But everyone's different. I try to stay in my lane. I'm not a female, and so I try not to have too much of an opinion about females. But what we experience as men a lot of times, and I've experienced this dating the last 4 years, was that a lot of women will create a lot of drama. And I had a relationship before where every time she wanted something, instead of just expressing it, calmly, she would get very dramatic and create a lot of drama. And we went and talked to a therapist, and after explaining all of our history, and we had dated for quite a while and we were at a crossroads, the therapist literally said to her, I need to teach you how to change this drama. And she said, no healthy emotional man will deal with this. Mm-hmm. So if you want a healthy man, you're going to have to change this drama. Mm-hmm. And I learned about something called the drama triangle, which is how to step out of drama, because I had some of it in my previous relationship where I did a lot of enabling and she did a lot of persecuting and victimizing, which is the drama triangle. You're either a persecutor, a victim, or an enabler. And I was an enabler. And so she discovered that the more victimizing she did, the more persecuting that she did, the more attention she got from me, and the more enabling I did. And if you want out of the drama, you can't be an enabler, a victim, or a persecutor. Okay. When somebody comes at you from those angles, you have to shift and either compromise or think of options or just gracefully bow out of the situation. Yeah. And so I began using those tools even with my ex-wife, and I no longer have anxiety over the drama. If she wants to participate, she gets to do it alone. Yeah. And I just usually my response is, well, that must be frustrating. Sorry you feel that way. Nope. The
drama doesn't last.
I was in a class where the teacher did this. He had me stand up and he said, put your fist against my fist. So it was my fist coming against his, and he applied force against my fist. And then he said, okay, push against my fist. And then he let go and my fist went like this. And he said, what happened? And I said, what do you mean what happened? And he goes, what happened? And I said, well, you stopped pushing. So I stopped. And he goes, exactly. Yeah. So if you step out of the drama and you just gracefully bow out, it's best if you can think of a compromise or you can think of something. But I found that it's so much more healthy. Even with my kids, we don't have contention in the home. We don't have yelling and screaming. If I walk down, think about this. It's like a miracle. If I walk downstairs and say, boys, they could be doing anything, video games. My son is my 17-year-old releasing his first album in a month. So he writes music and sings and performs. And if they're doing all that, if I walk downstairs and say, hey, we need to do the dishes, not one single complaint, not one single argument, everyone jumps up and we happily get it done. I think a lot of it's just learning how to communicate better, learning how to eliminate drama and contention. By the way, all of my kids every year, we set goals in these 5 areas.
Oh, cool. Each year.
Yeah. And then we can edit them and work on them throughout the year, because we're going to fail. We're going to miss. I think it's important to point this out before we're finished. But when it comes to goals, the transition in the mind for me, if there's people listening that are spiritual and faith-based and they pray as a habit, goals are the secular equivalent of prayer. So the earthly equivalent of goals, or the earthly equivalent of prayer is goal setting. So what I mean by that is we always sit down at night and we pray. And we pray for things, and most of the time they don't happen. But we don't stop praying.
Yeah.
Right? We say prayers all the time. Heavenly Father, give me this. Please bless me with this. Help me overcome this. Help me be better at this. And we pray and we pray and we pray and we pray, and we do it for years, day in and day out. But we don't stop when we don't get what we want. Yeah. Goals are the same way.
That's good. Very good analogy. I love that. What is the difference between like the mentality and the habits of someone who is poor and someone who is wealthy? I mean, there's definitely mindset.
Yeah. Well, it is very easy to point out the difference. The difference between the two is people that are very wealthy, they value money. And they also seek to tell their money what to do instead of have their money tell them what to do.
So we'll just stay in touch.
Awesome. Let me know. Happy to help.
Good enough people. Well, thank you. Thanks again, you guys. Have a good night.
Yeah, nice to chat with you. Thanks for inviting me.